Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in this budget debate. And just before I start, can I just touch on a couple of issues that the previous speaker has made, and numerous national MPs have made during this debate, that this is a budget for our times. And I'd just like to know what reference group this our is, because when I'm out and about in Mana, I don't hear anyone saying that this is a budget for our times. I don't hear anyone saying that. I hear them saying, well, this is a budget for their times. Because there's nothing in this budget for us here in Mana. Because when I hear them talking about the budget, they're worried about the cuts to KiwiSaver, asset sales, working for families, and that's not a budget for our times. That is not a budget for New Zealand in 2011. And the previous speaker also said that this budget was about protecting the vulnerable. That's a comedy act. That is a comedy act, because taking $600,000 away from women's refuge is not protecting the vulnerable. Let me look that up on Google and see if that's protecting the vulnerable. And making cuts in early childhood education doesn't sound like protecting the vulnerable to me. And also taking $120,000 out of a mental health care unit in Waitangiroa called New Avenues, leaving these community-based mental health patients nowhere to go, doesn't sound like protecting the vulnerable to me. It does not sound like protecting the vulnerable to me. So, Mr Speaker, I've got B2 and B3 here in my hands, the Minister's Executive Summary, and I'm seriously thinking of entering this in next year's fiction section of the New Zealand Post Book Awards. Because this and the volumes accompanying it should go right next to the Warren Report, because just like no one believes that Lee Harvey Oswald acted in isolation and killed JFK, no one believes anything in the volumes of this budget. No one believes anything in this budget, and its author, National Deputy Leader Bill English, should be commended for the creativity in this budget. And the Chief Storyteller, John Key, National Leader, should also be commended for his effort at selling this to the people and thinking that it's good for them. But it's not. Because there's so much that is unbelievable in here. There's so much that's unbelievable in here. Like the promise of 170,000 jobs. Wow. Where are they coming from? Someone show me right in here where those 170,000 jobs are going to come from. Because they're not going to come from early childhood education or national standards, as the Prime Minister, the National Leader, John Key, said in this House yesterday. It's certainly 170,000 jobs certainly aren't going to come from that. And where is this 4% wage growth forecast going to come from? Where is that come from? We're in this budget is a plan to make sure that 4% wage growth actually becomes reality. Because I don't think it's anywhere in there. And what about this is a good one. What about no one believes that there's a $4 billion gap between what IRD and Treasury say that this forecast revenue out of this budget. There's something actually missing from this publication, and it's called a plot or a plan. There's no real plan, no coherent plan to create jobs, for economic growth, and to help Kiwis who are struggling at the moment. This is not a budget for our times. This is not a budget for our times. And, actually, there's already been a review of this publication, and the acting Treasury Secretary said that the growth forecasts in this publication are too optimistic. So actually, maybe it has got no show of winning next year's New Zealand Post Fiction Awards. Maybe it doesn't. And what else is fiction in this document, and fiction in what's coming from the other side of the House, is that this budget is prudent. This budget has got $16.7 billion of deficit in it. And the audacity of the members from the other House to say that our plan is to borrow and hope. You are borrowing and hoping right now.
Order.
Sorry, the government is borrowing and hoping right now. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Please. Apologies for that. And this budget is fiction, and it fails to address the major problem right here in the New Zealand society at the moment. That's helping hard-working Kiwis who are struggling to make ends meet. And earlier in this debate, I heard Melissa Lee, an MP from the other side of the House, say that this budget is about savings. This budget is about savings. So why did the government cut $2.6 billion out of KiwiSaver? And I know when I've been out in street corner meetings and when I went to the Whakasa church last Sunday, that one of the questions I get there regularly is, why is the government making cuts to KiwiSaver? We made a deal when we signed up to KiwiSaver that we were going to put in this, and the government every year would put in around $1,042 so I could, over a long period of time, build up a nest egg for me and my family, so when I met retirement age, I would be able to support myself. But in this budget, the member tax credit has been cut in half, tinkering more with the KiwiSaver scheme, so it goes from $1,042, as I said before, the member tax credit, down to $521. And I know that definitely in mana, from right across the spectrum, whether you're from Cannons Creek or Pakakariki or Raumati South, that people are really concerned that this government has broken its promise to the people of New Zealand. John Key made that promise. He said we will not be tinkering with KiwiSaver, and lo and behold, in Budget 2011, what do we get? And, they claim that they are borrowing to pay for KiwiSaver, but that's not the truth at all. They're paying for the tax cuts that they brought in last year, and this is the truth, that 42% goes to the top 10% of earners. So our argument has always been, when we've got people on low and middle incomes at the moment who are struggling to make ends meet, the government's ill-advised and ill-planned tax cuts went to those who didn't need it as much. So, as I say, this is a broken promise from this government, broken promise from John Key not to tinker with KiwiSaver. I think another speaker from this side of the House said earlier that this is repeating the mistake of the Muldoon era of tinkering with the confidence that Kiwis have in a robust superannuation scheme. And what else have we got in this budget? Asset sales. Now, when we start talking asset sales, that side of the House goes quiet. Yep. Because they know that they know just how unpopular asset sales are. And we've already seen, well, Nick Smith says it's a great policy. Well, let's see how that goes out in the hustings and how that went in the New Zealand Herald 2 or 3 weeks ago. A great policy. And the best line that this government has about asset sales is that we're selling it to mum and dad investors. Well, mum and dad investors already own it. And I'm sorry to say, but at the moment, mum and dad investors are struggling to put food on the table. So can someone on the other side of the House please tell me how those mum and dad investors are going to afford to buy shares and assets that they already own? And, look, you've already gutted KiwiSaver. And, $700 million is brought in by the four power companies that are owned by those mum and dads right now. So what happens to those profits if, as they... What's the line they use? Mixed ownership model, mixed up ownership model. What happens if that starts going overseas? Well, that constant flow of revenue that New Zealand taxpayers get to make sure that we are paying off debt and we're paying for the things that Kiwis rely on goes overseas. And they say they're not going to sell all of it off. Well, let's see what happens when Don Brash enters this parliament, if God forbid he does enter this parliament. Because you can be absolutely 100% guaranteed that those assets will be going overseas. Now, Mr. Speaker, what is the reality? We've had the fiction, what is the reality? Well, the reality is that Kiwis are struggling to make ends meet. And that's borne out in the Kapiti Mana a couple of weeks ago, where it says more turning to food banks. Here it is, black and white. 3 years ago, we had 20 families ask for parcels. Last year, it was 32. Our cupboards are very bare right now. There seems to be so much more pressure on people today. The wages are not there, while prices for food and other things like rent and power are going up. In black and white. And what about this week in the Kapiti Mana? A half-page advertisement pleading for people to take food to the food banks because they're so stretched. In the earlier edition of the Kapiti Mana, the St Vincent de Paul's has been in Porirua for 26 years. And for the first time in 10 years, they've run out of food. But not only run out of food, but they're also run out of people to bring food to their shop. Because the supply and the demand is going absolutely nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So what do we need? We need a government with a plan. We need a government that realises that prices are rising faster than wages. We need a government that makes sure that we can give hard-working Kiwis a break. And we need a government that will stop asset sales so we can keep our power prices under control, and also make sure that the mum and dad investors that the government is talking about who actually already own these assets can continue to own them. We need a government who will take some bold steps like making the first $5,000 of income tax-free. That's a real step to make sure people are making ends meet. and are doing things like taking the GST off fresh fruit and vegetables. A move that will cost us about $300 million, but when we are spending $500 million on obesity-related diseases, I think that is a very wise move. Mr. Speaker, this is the budget that hurts but does not help.
Order. Time's expired. Honourable next.